Lady River, and welcome to Gaia Unveiled, the podcast on science for witches and pagans. So glad to have you here. The mainstream of our culture believes itself distanced from the so-called natural world, whether by a non-living materialist view of reality or a religious dualist one. But insofar as paganism is a nature religion, we can't afford to distance ourselves that way. The accuracy of our model of reality determines the accuracy of our models of ourselves, our craft, and our gods, and we acknowledge that those distinctions are illusory. At the same time, our craft cannot contradict physical facts and still maintain validity. Therefore, the better we understand the world from a scientific viewpoint, the better pagans and witches we can be. The magical and the scientific are two faces of the same goddess. To that end, this podcast will cover, since I don't know everyone's base of knowledge, basic scientific topics. I hope that each subject's relevance to paganism and or witchcraft will be apparent, so sometimes I won't take the time to go into it overtly. Sometimes it just may be, ain't the world cool, and that's the topic for the day. I hope each subject at the very least will be fun and or interesting. So you know something about me. I'm a third-degree Wiccan Priestess, but somehow never received the stick-up-my-ass that term often implies. I blame my teachers for their oversight. I have a bachelor's degree in science, but that was a soft science and long ago, and so I didn't formally study most of what I will cover here. This is my official disclaimer that I'm a self-educated layperson in most scientific fields. I'll try my best to be accurate, and I hope that my lay status will keep things understandable. If I mess something up in your field, please do let me know. Future topics will range from brain activity in trance states to how chlorophyll works on a chemical level. I hope to hit a wide variety of both hard and soft sciences. I've got a huge list, but I'm very open to suggestions. In this first installment, though, I think it's best to lay a foundation by discussing just what I mean by science. What, in fact, is the scientific method? The scientific method delineates a process for investigating phenomena around us, which allows for fruitful evaluation of ideas between investigators, a sort of ground rules for fair argument about the nature of material reality. Those who have accepted these rules are scientists, and the body of knowledge they have acquired in this way is science. First, investigations must begin with observation. One notices something interesting and wants to know more about it. As an example, I will pretend an observation that my buddy Basil jumped and glared at me. Would you look at that? Second, one forms a hypothesis about the observed phenomenon. Perhaps he jumped because I poked him in the ribs of my umbrella. In actual practice, the hypothesis can be a cause-effect statement, a mathematical model, or have other forms. Third, the hypothesis must yield a prediction about results to be tested by experimentation or further quantifiable observation. In our example, the hypothesis predicts that if we poke Basil again, he will again jump and glare. For clear results, it must be possible to isolate or remove effects that may be unrelated to your hypothesis. Here, I'd want to make sure that he is free of neurological defects and any electroshock apparatus, that no one else is poking him with a pencil, say, that sort of thing. If the extraneous effects aren't removable, or if you're observing and not experimenting, there are further procedures. These results must be measurable. I can count how often he jumps when poked, and I can measure how high. I can't measure how he feels about it, but I can measure his answers on a quiz about that. Lastly, the test and its results must have repeatability. You, and other researchers entirely independent of you, must be able to get the same results you did under the same conditions. We, and others as well, must be able to poke Basil a number of times, and we'd need to anyway for statistical reliability, and have him jump more often than by chance alone. If a process of investigation consistently stands up to these considerations, that is, if the hypothesis accurately predicts test results, it's considered valid, the scientific equivalent of true, until some future study disproves it. If Basil repeatedly jumps and glares, our hypothesis has been upheld. If he eventually collapses to the floor instead, or hits us in the head, further study would then be necessary. Truth is not forever in science, though many ideas have been studied enough to be considered close enough as to not matter. A further common consideration, although one not required for scientific validity, is that of ethics. Should we be poking our dear friend Basil? Are the implications of this hypothesis important enough to justify it anyway? Is there some other way we could obtain our results, perhaps through the use of computer models, or asking him what he would do if we poked him? Naturally, there's a lot of variation here in actual practice, and a lot of stuff you'd need to do and avoid that I've left out for simplicity. Often it appears the scientific method has been followed when it really hasn't been, or not well. Good experimental or observational design is key. The results must be free of bias, measurements must be accurate and appropriate. Measuring atoms with a ruler is pointless. Non-supportive data must not be marginalized or ignored. There will always be some sources of error in even the best study. These must be identified and clearly stated, or the results aren't very useful. If the results differ from similar studies, the reasons why must be found. As you have no doubt guessed, many topics aren't suitable for scientific study or are possible only with difficulty. The phenomenon must be observable. Seems obvious, right? It's easy if you're studying rocks, but how does one observe love or humor or intelligence or magic? You can't. I mean, you can devise instruments like IQ tests to study these ephemerals, but in the strictest sense, you're studying the tests, not the actual ephemeral they purport to measure. This is the main difference between hard and soft sciences. The less measurable the phenomenon, the more difficult it is to design a study of it that conforms to scientific method. To sum up so far, to be science, the phenomenon to be studied must be measurable and quantifiable, so we have something to discuss and compare. You must be able to make a hypothesis about it that is a useful predictor, and it must be capable of being tested somehow. One must be able to separate irrelevant variables. The test must be repeatable and, ideally, ethical. If you want grant money, that is. Look at this list, and you can see the problems inherent in, for example, most parapsychological research and why creationism isn't science. Next time you hear of a new scientific study in the media, listen closely and see if you are given any information by which to evaluate the validity of the study. I'll bet you'll only be given the results, which alone are virtually useless. A quick couple of definitions and we'll be done for now. What are the differences between a hypothesis, a theory, a model, and a law? A hypothesis is an educated guess to be tested, whether or not it actually has been tested or proved valid. It's a small, practical idea you can try out for yourself for evaluation. A theory is a more complex and abstract idea supported by one or more validated hypotheses. After poking a number of people with the same results, we might form a theory that people don't like being poked, at least in our culture, and perhaps even being prodded, pinched, or pounded would yield similar results and be added to the theory in time. Remember, science isn't so arrogant as to believe it can find permanent truth, but in scientific jargon, a theory is about as close as you can get. It's not readily cast aside until there's an abundance of evidence against it, and along with laws, theories provide the foundation upon which further hypotheses and study are based. Note the contrast with the commonplace use of the word theory, much like the contrast between pagan usage of the word myth and the mundane. Aspects of the theory of special relativity are the basis for the process of nuclear fission. Yes, relativity is only a theory, but I still don't recommend you stand at ground zero at any bomb tests. A model is like a theory or hypothesis, but less accurate. It's an idea that has acknowledged faults, but is still pretty useful most of the time. Those Tinker Toy models of molecules in high school are pretty inaccurate, let's face it, but they're still pretty useful for understanding how atoms fit together. A model isn't always physical. They can be abstract, but still a useful metaphor for what they describe. A law is like a theory, but is both more simple and therefore more universally applicable. It works on a deeper level. A theory may only apply on, say, a macrocosmic scale, but a law must apply everywhere in the universe. For example, the law of conservation of matter and energy is not only simple, the total quantity of matter and energy available in the universe is a fixed amount and never any more or less, but it applies everywhere in the universe, from galactic to subatomic scale. Laws are double plus true and are the given basic facts of the makeup of the universe. Okay, yes, even they occasionally have exceptions, but that's a later episode. So that's your basic primer on science. Most of this won't come up regularly in future episodes, but all the information in them can be assumed to have been investigated and confirmed in this manner. It is our basis of perfect trust, our salt on the altar, our oaths of initiation. Next episode will be shorter and lighter, maybe how pentacles create seashell spirals or the solar system brought down to rational size, something fun like that. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time, keep reasoning, and blessed be. Hey again, real quick thing. If you liked this podcast, dropping a review in your podcast app is a great way to support the show and makes you 16% cooler than you already are. Or you can come geek out with us on the Gaia Unveiled Facebook page, or support the show at patreon.com/Gaia_Unveiled. If you can spare a few bucks a month, you get some nifty rewards, and I get a personal connection with you that helps me make the show even better. You can also find me on Twitter at LadyRiver8 or email me at GaiaUnveiled@gmail.com. You can find the show wherever you like to listen to podcasts, and even on YouTube with transcripts. See you soon, and thanks.